outside of Georgia, Seth, who strikes you as a team that can kind of rise up into the new hierarchy of this conference?
Right away, Texas, coming off a playoff trip, quarterback coming back, pretty solid recruiting because it's Texas. They went and got the guy who was going to be Alabama's best receiver. And they have a good schedule. When I did this go through everybody's schedule next year, I actually had Texas originally 8-0, but then just for funsies, I had them lose at Texas A&M in the last one. LSU, you're right about them. I mentioned how earlier I had them 8-0, and again, I think conservatively, I think they're going to lose a couple games somewhere. I just look at their schedule. I'm not sure which ones. On the other hand, Georgia has to go to Alabama still. They have to go to Texas. They have to go to Ole Miss. Ole Miss is the interesting one because they are not one of those that Ari you would put like in normally in your top tier. But they're going for it. They got Jackson Dart coming back. They don't have Quinshon Judkins coming back, but they've got their receivers coming back, and they went in the portal and got guys like Warren Nolan. Now they lost Tyler Barron. They thought they had him, and then he flipped to Louisville of all places. But it just points to the SEC is going to be really strong right away in this first year. And I think some good teams are going to miss the playoffs. Some surprising teams are like an Alabama. Like right now, I don't think I would pick Alabama to make the playoffs. And some of that's just going to be because of how tough the schedule is going to be. And I don't think it's a slam dunk for Georgia to make the playoffs because of their schedule. And I think, oh God, I do not want to get into a debate with Ari on
Did you just say that?
Sanctity of the regular season. But I have said all along, and it came home to me when I went through this. And if you haven't seen the story I did, again, everyone's kind of latching on to, Seth made these predictions. Seth picked LSU to go 12-0. What is he smoking? It's like, well, no, this was just an exercise to show what it's going to look like, a very early look at what it's going to look like. And one of the things that came home is it's going to be hard. And I think every game still is going to matter. It may not matter as much if a team is 11-0 sometime in November and they know they're in, even if they lose one or two more games. But Georgia knows that they've got to go beat Georgia or Texas or Alabama, for instance, in the first couple months, or they may be locked out. It's going to be a grind in the SEC. And to kind of turn it back to everything we're talking about, Alabama is in danger of falling out of the picture in year one. But what Kenny was pointing to as in the lack of Southern ties, I'm not as worried about that either. And the fact that Kalen DeBoer has won everywhere he's been, I think that's good too. The thing is, you wonder if there is a limit to that, because Brian Kelly never did win a national championship at Notre Dame. He hasn't won one at LSU, but he's only had 2 years. It's still tough. It's still really tough to do it. But Alabama obviously made a really interesting hire, and it's the more you watch things, the more you get fascinated to see how it goes, because they didn't go get Dabo Swinney or someone with Alabama lineage or anyone from the Saban tree. They went away from the South, away from the Saban tree, and it's a really fascinating thing to watch.
Yeah, I think that like watching Kalen DeBoer last year and Grubbs last year was just a thing of beauty. Like the way that they drew up that offense, like picturing those guys with Alabama athletes is really, really fun. I mean, they had Rome Odunze and Michael Penix Jr. They had guys on that Washington offense, but just, sustained elite level success paired up with those minds is a very exciting thing. No one, I think, is saying that Kalen DeBoer isn't a phenomenal coach. I think that they will have Alabama as ready as they possibly can be based on whatever limitations they have on the roster. My number one question, and I think everyone's number one question, is whether or not Kalen DeBoer, Courtney Morgan, his general manager, if that's going to be the title there in Tuscaloosa, and the staff that he's assembling will be able to continue the tradition of titles. And I don't mean winning national titles. I mean winning recruiting titles, or at least being in the mix to win those. Because I think if not, it's going to be a very different place. And Seth, you just said you're not sure if Georgia or Alabama is going to make the playoff next year. Oh, give me my popcorn. I'd love to see what that looks like in Tuscaloosa if that happens.
Well, yeah, and you don't want him to go the Dan Mullen route and get overconfident in his own evaluation ability.
Right.
Like that. That's the danger for Kalen.
I think a lot of people. That's an apt point, because I think a lot of people are comparing him to Brian Harsin. Not comparing him to Brian Harsin, saying Brian Harsin is when things go bad. A coach who comes into the SEC and thinks he's going to out-evaluate guys like Alabama, Nick Saban, and Kirby Smart. They evaluate.
These guys evaluate. Yeah, like I could go on. We have to run, but I could go on and on about the 3 stars, and by the way, walk-on quarterback that Georgia had on their national championship teams. Like they've evaluated very well.